Words are really important. So having shared definitions for words like racial equity or racism or resilience is really important because it can help create shared understanding and then maybe shared solutions. So we think words are really important and they're first critical step in talking about and acting to address racial equity. First word is resilience. So maybe you've heard of the resilience strategy or resilient Tulsa. But in the city of Tulsa, resilience means the ability to survive, adapt, and thrive through chronic stressors or acute shocks. And so what that means in action is, for example, during COVID, how organizations repurposed their equipment, their cars, their buses to deliver food when they were delivering other things. That is a resilience quality, to be able to repurpose quickly to meet a need for a community. So the next word is equity. So equity is sometimes confused with equality. So I'd love to talk about both of them. So first, equity is basically it's a process and an outcome, but it can be what people need versus giving everybody the same thing, which would be equality. So equity means that people get what they need and outcomes for everyone are improved. On equality, that's kind of maybe what people kind of are more familiar with. Everyone getting the same thing. But equality may not always work if not everyone's starting off in the same place. So that's why we talk about equity a lot. Number 4 is racism. So this is very important word to talk about in our country, in the state, and here in Tulsa. And so racism actually isn't just one thing. There are levels of racism. And so racism can occur at an interpersonal level. So that's racial prejudice that maybe people experience. It could happen on a organizational or institutional level. So the country's history of redlining and shutting out neighborhoods from home loans to deny mortgages and then the ability to build wealth. That's sort of institutional racism that produces outcomes that disparately impact certain races or ethnicities. So racism, to define sort of the interpersonal piece of it, is a system that assigns value and assigns privileges to one group over another. And in this country, the groups that are disadvantaged are communities of color, and the groups that have been experiencing advantages or the sort of valuing over the other groups have been white community. So power and oppression is part of racism. So the fifth one, so we had to define racism before we could talk about racial equity. So racial equity is the sort of state that we want to be in where race can no longer be used to predict your life outcomes. So right now in this country, in this state, in Tulsa, your health outcomes, economic outcomes can technically be predicted by your race or ethnicity, given disparities in all of those domains. And so racial equity means that your race can no longer be the predictor of your life outcomes and that all outcomes are improved for all races and ethnicities. So the last one is also related. It's another equity word. It's called health equity. So health equity talks about how no matter where you live, work, or play, you're able to live a full, healthy life. And so we sometimes talk about the social determinants of health impacting your health outcomes. So health equity means that no matter where you live, your zip code, your race or ethnicity, that you have great health outcomes. We wanted to talk about language and why it's important because it's a foundational building block of addressing racial equity. So we'd like to start a conversation with Tulsans. There's a few ways that someone could continue this conversation or this exploration. We are hosting equity dialogues, and so you can go to cityoftulsa.org/equity and sign up and get on the list for the next ones that are happening in October. You talk about these 6 words, kind of look up more definitions of them, talk about them in your household, in your family. Talk about it in your community, because the more we talk about it, the more we can get to solutions if we're all speaking the same language.